Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. As you know, in part three of our sports show, each week we use an international feature where we look at renowned events, sporting events, and sports entertainment events all over the world. And up for discussion this week, it's a prominent moment for the country of Wales, dare I say. They made history in terms of wrestling in the past, and they're making it again, this time with Impact Wrestling. They've just been crowned the Impact Tag Team Wrestling Champions, victorious in Slammiversary. They're called Subculture. We know them as Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster. And before I just get into talking about the fight, lads, and the victory in itself and the significance, wow, what a roller coaster year for you so far. 2023 has been in Impact Wrestling. Are you ahead of schedule, dare I say?
Yeah, it has been a bit of a crazy schedule, to be honest. And as you said, like a roller coaster of a year, lots of ups and lots of downs. But after last weekend at Slammiversary, it definitely feels like an up right now, doesn't it, Flash?
Yeah, as Mark said, crazy. The last year has been absolutely mental. But I know that when Mark left Impact a few years, the things he wished he could tick off was a championship win. And who knew? Well, he didn't know at the time, but he needed his and Flash Morgan Webster to come along and help him with that, and we've got the job done.
I suppose, what does it mean to you guys when you look at some of the historic teams that have held the Impact Tag Team Championship? When we look at Beer Money, when we look at the Outlaws, America's Most Wanted, when we look at Motor City Machine Guns, Team 3D, Beer Money. Just some of those names that are iconic and have gone on to do some incredible things in the business and in all aspects of wrestling. To have your name associated with those sort of names and subculture, to be on the same sort of list as Beer Money, Team 3D, America's Most Wanted, LAX, some sort of renowned teams down through the history. Has it really struck you the poignance of that so far?
Yeah, it really has. It's funny, I was looking through the list the other day and we had the 66th tag team champions in Impact Wrestling history. And the first match I ever watched when I was a kid was the Dudley Boys versus the Hardy Boys at Royal Rumble 2000. And to think that both the Dudley Boys, known as Team 3D at the time, as you said, and the Hardy Boys have been Impact Wrestling Tag Team Champions, and now those straps are around our waist. That's mind blowing, to be honest. It's crazy because me and Flash a few years ago when we were crowned the NXT UK Tag Team Champions, we were the first Welsh champions in WWE history, which was, to be honest, the biggest moment in both of our careers. That being said, the NXT UK Tag Team Championships were relatively new championships. I think we were only the third or fourth champions in history, whereas then you come over to Impact, and although we're not the first Welsh champions in Impact history, there has been a Welsh champion before, but we are added to this list of, as you said, like historic names, big names who've held these championships. So in some ways, it does feel bigger. In some ways, this is the biggest achievement in our career because we're added to that list of the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, Motor City Machine Guns, all these teams that we've looked up to our entire wrestling careers. And to be added to that list is, it really is the kind of, Flash said a minute ago that I always had a goal to win gold in Impact Wrestling, but to be a tag team champion is in some ways even more than I could ever expect, because we are now up there with those names that you've mentioned.
And I suppose sometimes in wrestling, when we look at the greatest wrestling adversaries in terms of rivals, makes for the best tag teams when they come together. I remember a few years ago, we just looked at Austin Aries and Bobby Roode, great rivalry, came together, fantastic sort of tag team. But there's sort of a similar story here with Subculture, here with Mark Andrews and with Morgan Webster, because back in 2017, if someone told you that you were going to be a tag team together after all the grueling matches you put each other through, would you have probably said that's not going to work? There's too much friction between the two of us.
I think what the luckiest really is we had trained together. We come up through the ranks, and I openly say, and I've said it many times, like a part of my progression in this mod character and who Flash Morgan Webster was having Mark Andrews ahead of me every step of the way. And anytime I thought I did something really cool, Mark Andrews did it before me, and I couldn't walk that path. I had to find my own path. But yeah, I think through see Mark progress, see the stuff he did, and then I'm to forge my own path, my own personality style. It meant that when we did find each other and we did a team, as you said, in 2017, 2018, we had two very well-rounded wrestlers that brought two very different approaches to a high-flying style together. So although, yeah, we could probably look back and say maybe like I wouldn't like this, now it works, and it works to a level that I can totally understand why, because we are two completely different high flyers.
Yeah. And when I looked at Subculture, I was trying to look at them in terms of previous sort of tag team champions of Impact Wrestling and sort of similarities in terms of real style. And the Wolves came to mind. The Wolves, the sort of tag team, in terms of, did you have that sort of technical ability and in-ring ability in terms of the cohesion as well? You're not just two real high flyers as well. You sort of have that cohesiveness that the Wolves had, the Wolves brought together when they were a phenomenal tag team. Do you think that's a fair assessment in terms of if I was saying that you're similar more to the Wolves than you would be to Beer Money or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. Maybe more on the kind of high flying side of the technical wrestling spectrum. But I guess the fact that we both come from the UK, and it's easy to forget that the British wrestling scene is it is a technical wrestling territory, so it's stuff that we see as relatively normal kind of day one training stuff. In the rest of the world, that is seen as strong technical wrestling. So I do think, me and Flash cut from the same cloth in the same way that Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards were when they became a team. And I think that definitely does help with becoming a team, So those basics, those technical basics are kind of rooted within us. And then we can kind of hybrid it with a lot of our high flying stuff that we've picked up over the years from traveling around the world. But yeah, I definitely think that it helps with our style and sets us apart from other teams that are maybe just high flyers. The fact that we can do the technical wrestling as well.
And I suppose, wow, what can we say about the explosion of British wrestlers and Irish wrestlers in the last 10 years, particularly making their mark in the wrestling industry in America? It's been phenomenal, the amount of them, not just male wrestlers, but female wrestlers as well. It seems to be growing and growing and growing. So it just goes to show you that the big major companies, the wrestling companies in America now, are looking at Britain very, very strongly, are looking at Ireland very, very strongly, and those sort of wrestlers in those scene. And they're obviously saying they're cherry picking now in terms of the best talent, and they're bringing them over. They're not waiting around. While years in the past, I remember Fit Finlay or Dave Finlay, probably he had to wait so long to get his opportunity over in the States. But now at the time it is, if you're good enough, if you're a real sort of talent, they're going to bring you straight across. They're not going to wait around anymore.
No, and I totally agree. And I think one of the biggest factors of that is information, and the internet is so widely available. Before, there would have been tape traders, there would have been people who were ready for the big time, ready to be out in America, but they even needed to know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody that could give them a shot or get their promo picture in front of somebody or a video in somebody's hands. Whereas now, like, you can type in British wrestling and on YouTube, and there's so many videos. Or you could be on Twitter and you could literally type in Welsh wrestlers and me and Mark come up or whatever. So again, it is that age of information. If you have access to a computer, which again these big companies do, and they have access to the internet, they can just kind of scour the globe, have a look at, okay, a Turkish wrestler, who's the best Turkish wrestler? We need Welsh wrestlers, who's the best Welsh wrestlers? And I think because of that, now it means the people that are good enough and people that are, grafting away get the opportunities they deserve.
And I suppose one thing with Subculture is you're using your own sort of unique sort of twist in terms of your storyline. You're not really going down the routes of Welsh tradition like some wrestlers in the past with the Scottish sort of kills, the Scottish sort of wrestlers really buying that into it. Or you have the famous wrestler here in Ireland called Sheamus, obviously, who's really buys into that whole sort of Irish malarkey in terms of these costumes. But you start to let your wrestling do the talking. You want to be known as a tag team and not really sort of being saying, oh, they're getting the opportunity just because they're Welsh and that this is something that hasn't been seen maybe in the last 5 or 6 years within the wrestling industry. I know it's an important element of your character, but it's more the team really than where you come from, if you get my drift.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I mean, it's funny, me and Flash are both I'd say very patriotic in terms of wanting to put Wales on the map for professional wrestling, because when we were starting out in wrestling, there was nothing really in Wales. There were, other than Adrian Street, who was before our time, there wasn't really any big Welsh stars in wrestling. So although we are very, very motivated to put Wales on the map for professional wrestling, even if we wanted to use Wales as a gimmick, most of the world isn't aware of what a Welsh person is, really. You know, you go to America and you ask them if they know the difference between an English or a Welsh person or a Scottish person and a Welsh person, and they don't tend to know. So, although, yeah, big plans to put Wales on the map, I don't think it's something that really defines our character other than the pride that we come from Wales. I also think the truth is, you know, when it comes to Subculture and the brand that we try and portray to the world in wrestling, we have a very DIY ethic. You know, we edit our own music video, sorry, our own entrance video. We we helped kind of write and produce the entrance theme, and spray our own jackets. It's a very DIY ethic. So I guess, in my opinion, there's kind of more interesting things about us than just being Welsh. I would never want to be known as a wrestler who's famous for being the only Welsh one. I'd want to be known as, someone who's flying the flag because they're from Wales and they're also pretty good wrestlers as well.
Yeah. I suppose, Mark, coming to you, I suppose British Boot Camp in 2014, you sort of made your name in terms of this company in the past, and you're sort of linked with it in the past. Was it almost like a second coming when you came back to the sort of industry, or do you almost feel that it's so changed? Because when you were there in 2014, obviously you had probably AJ was there, you had probably Samoa Joe, Abyss was there, all these guys in the Pomp, Sting was there. So it's almost like you're coming into, dare I say, not a new industry, but an entirely new locker room. I know like Sabin and Shelley obviously are still around, but an awful lot of the familiar faces that would have topped the card, the main sort of card guys, they've all sort of moved on. So it's a different, dare say, era in terms of guys who are sort of on the top card. So does it almost feel like a new experience in one sense, in terms of so many faces that you were seeing on a day-to-day basis are no longer there?
Yeah, it's funny, right? I mean, it definitely feels like a new era. It is really, it's a new era of Impact Wrestling. However, with that being said, it was really, really nice going back into the locker room and actually realizing how many people there I did know. I'd say like maybe 80% of the locker room I'd known either from my time there before or just from my time in wrestling in general. There's people there who me and Flash had met when we were in WWE or traveling the world on the indies. So really, it was a very, very welcoming locker room. And as fond as I look back at my time in Impact back in 2014 to 2016, and it really was a great morale when I was working there back then, I'd say it's even better now. It really is a wrestler's locker room. It's just, me and Flash were saying this the other day when we were flying back from Slammiversary. Like, it's like a locker room that I've never experienced before in my career in 17 years. The morale backstage at Impact Wrestling right now is one of the best I've ever experienced in my career. Really, it's a wonderful place to be, and we plan on being there at least for a bit longer, whilst we have these tag team championships at least.
And final question to Subculture then, guys, I suppose, in terms of looking ahead to 2024, I got to ask you, are you all down for the steel cage matches, the TLC matches, the high flying, to bring back some of those extreme sort of matches? Is that what Subculture is all about, not playing safe? Do you want all those type of dare I say, those magic moments that so many tag teams have created in the past? Do you want to find yourselves in those arenas? And do you see them as all as ties, these steel chairs, tables, ladders, as a great sense of entertainment for you? Are we going to see Subculture in 2024 maybe take a different variety in terms of what matches they're going to expose their fans to?
I think I can speak for both of us when I say, like, when we were growing up, Mark said about watching the Hardy Boys versus the Dudley Boys. Like, we watched the TLC where Edge and Christian were involved, and we've been in a lot of ladder matches. We have a lot of fun in them. We've been in a lot of TLCs. I've never been in a steel cage match. I'm pretty well, maybe Mark's been in one steel cage match, maybe.
Been in one, only one.
But yeah, I'd love to be in my first one, and I'd love to have Mark Andrews next to me. If we can literally do some sort of crazy stuff off a steel cage and entertain those fans and get a sick photo in the process, I am all for that, as well as defending and keeping those tag team championships.
On that note, Subculture, many congratulations, crowned Impact Wrestling champions in Slammiversary, defeating Moose, Brian Myers, Sammy Callan, Nick Swan, and obviously defeating the original champions, Chris Bay and Ace Austin. No doubt they'll want coming around. They'll be looking for the rematch. But for the moment, Subculture, Impact Wrestling champions, we look forward to see how long your reign will last heading into 2023 and 2024. But for the moment, for me, Jim Conlan, to you, Mark Andrews, Flash Morgan Webster, Subculture, stay safe.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.